Everybody should be muted. Charlotte, you might have to mute yourself there.
I will mute myself now. Oh.
Thank you.
Whoops, it's not working.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, if anybody else needs help, otherwise you should all be muted. We don't, in case you get into a fight with
Rabbi, you're muted.
You're muted.
Okay, there you go. Well, I want to wish everybody a Hanukkah Sameach here already in Israel, the last night of Hanukkah. Those tuning in from Chutz La'aretz, you're still got some time until you begin your last night. So hopefully this will be a year that is brighter and lighter than the past year. Although hopefully we will look back on this and we will recognize some of the blessings that came from it, I hope. So to everybody who's joining us, very much appreciated that you took time on this Hanukkah. This is a little bit of a different kind of a shir, but it does relate to the Parsha, and it also, I will try to finish up relating a bit to Hanukkah as well. We're going to talk about the mystical meaning of dreams. It's a very fascinating subject, one which has a great deal of input from Jewish sources, particularly the Gemara, the Talmud in Brachot, which waxes very, very poetic about dreams. And I'm going to do some quotes from the Gemara there and discuss this concept of dreams. The Parsha, we know, deals with Yosef and revolves somewhat around his dreams. Rashi says, bringing the Medrash, everything that happened to Yaakov happened to Yosef. Yaakov was hated by his brothers and by his brother, and so was Yosef. He had to descend to Egypt, and so did Yosef, and on and on. And of course, Yaakov was a dreamer. He has arguably the most famous dream in the Torah, the dream about the ladder, Sulam Mutzav Arza, which, by the way, is the only one of the dreams. I'm going to tell you in a moment a lot of other people who dream. And Yaakov's dream is the only one that is not interpreted, which is interesting because it leaves the field open for any interpretation that you want to give to that famous dream. All the other dreams, we know the significance of them and what they are supposed to mean, except the dream of Yaakov. In any case, the fact, I think, showing why dreams are so important, when Chazal chose a Haftorah for this week's Parsha of Miketz, they chose the Haftorah from Melachim, talking about the dream of Shlomo HaMelech, which opens up the opening words of the Haftorah, and Shlomo awoke from his dream. That was the famous dream where Hashem appears to him. He's a young boy of only 12 at the time, and asked, "What do you want?" And he says what is commonly known, that he asked for wisdom. He didn't ask for gold. He didn't ask for long life or a mansion. He asked for wisdom. The actual words says he asked for a leiv shomea, a hearing heart. It's usually interpreted, though, as wisdom. I personally think that those words are beautiful words. In other words, to have the ability to hear others is a tremendous gift. A heart that cares about others, that's willing to listen to others and take an interest not only in oneself, but in another person. So it's a beautiful idea. Hashem was very, very impressed. And so he said, you'll have all the other things people would have wished for. And indeed, he became maybe the wealthiest person in our history. There was nobody wealthier than Shlomo, than King Solomon, and all of his stables and all of his pomp and circumstance. Not talking about his wives. I'm not sure he would have wished for that, 300 wives, as it said. But he, again, was given this credit for his wisdom, and then follows the famous story about the two women claiming two babies, one alive and one dead. We all know that story. It's one of the most famous stories in literature. And he has the wisdom to be able to discern who is the true mother. So clearly, when they chose that Haftorah, they were saying that because they wanted to pick something that relates to the Parsha, and there's a lot they could have chosen, but they chose to talk about dreams. So that indicates that there's a very significant purpose for dreams. So we're going to try to talk about dreams and see if we can make any sense of what does Jewish tradition say about it. We have a number of people in the Torah literature who dream. Some Jewish, some not Jewish. Abimelech dreams. God appears to him in a dream, right? And he tells him, do not harm Sarah. Lavan has a dream. God appears and says, do not harm Yaakov. Of course, in our story that we're following, the butler and the baker, they have their dreams that Yosef interprets. Pharaoh has his dreams that Yosef interprets. There are dreams of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, and others. So we see a dream motif that exists all throughout the Torah literature. What exactly is a dream? And it's interesting that scientists have been studying dreams for umpteen years and still know very, very little about them. There was, I remember, a very famous, I think it was Time magazine, either Time or Newsweek, that ran a whole edition just on the subject of dreams. What are they? Are they a form of prophecy? We know that, as the Gemara will tell us, dreams are 1/60th of prophecy, which leaves 59 out of 60 parts something else. But is it a way that God is trying to tell us something? Are dreams something, as Sigmund Freud said, merely a release of one's suppressed or hidden urges and desires, to a large extent sexual? And now when you go to sleep, that which you kept suppressed in your conscious day-to-day life comes out at night in dreams. Do dreams predict the future? Do they really have that power to tell us something that's hidden? We'll see a Gemara on that in a little bit later. Can our departed loved ones reach out to us via dreams? Can you pray to have a dream? The Gemara talks about that as well. To pray to have a dream. There were certain disciples of famous rabbis who prayed that they would be connected to their rabbi who had passed away. And people will often long to dream about loved ones just so to be reminded of them. And indeed, there's different prayers that can be said so that you have that kind of a dream. The rabbis are divided about the significance of dreams. Some of them say, don't take it too seriously. The empiricists like Rambam would say, don't attach any esoteric or mystical meaning to it, and don't react too much to it one way or the other. If it's a really bad dream, if it's a really good dream, and not to get overly excited about the dream. But there are others who see dreams as indeed revealing certain hidden truths or the potential of bringing blessing or the opposite. And indeed, that seems to be the position that the Gemara is taking, that it's saying, putting a lot of stock in dreams with some conditions. There's a third viewpoint, and that is that it depends who's doing the dreaming. If we are talking about Nevi'im, who were chosen by God to deliver a message to the nation or the world at large, then yes, God will often communicate with that Navi through dreams. Some would call it a trance-like state. Others would say, no, they go to sleep, they have a dream, and they understand, because they are a bona fide Navi, that this is a message from God. And of course, today we don't have Nevi'im. So when somebody, tells you they dreamt they're a prophet and that you're supposed to turn over your entire bank account to them, no, we're not going to follow that. But people who are Nevi'im, or as we saw with Yosef, here his dreams clearly were a message from Hashem, and they were meant to come true. And as in some of the other people I mentioned, these were individuals at a very, very high spiritual level. And so those messages would be authentic, whereas our everyday dreams, not so much. However, as I said, the Gemara puts a lot of stock in dreams and devotes a tremendous amount of discussion to dreams. If one wants, it's a fascinating section of the Talmud. If you look in the Gemara of Brachot, somewhere around the 54th or 55th daf, Nun Daled, Nun Hey, the Gemara goes on for a long time discussing the significance of dreams, and we'll talk about some of the things the Gemara says, what they are meant to mean if that appears to you in a dream. But it's interesting that dreams, to some extent, are out of our control, but to a great extent actually are within our control. And we'll talk about that at length in a moment. But the Gemara says the way we relate to our dreams can actually motivate us to go in a certain path. I dreamt I was successful in business, and that motivated me to go into business and have confidence that I could succeed, and I succeeded. And therefore, the Gemara is taking into account the effect that dreams can have on us and use it in a very positive way. Words can create reality. And so one of the things we're going to see is that how you interpret a dream is fundamental to what that dream means to you. So let me quote some of the more highlights, some of the highlights of the Gemara. This is all coming from this Gemara in Brachot. One of the statements, a dream not interpreted is like a letter which is never opened. And that is kind of subscribing to that first opinion that says, well, if I don't think about it and I don't try to explore what it means, then it's not really going to have any effect on me. Some could read this, some could read this differently. If you get a letter from the draft board and you don't open it, it doesn't mean you haven't been drafted or that you're not going to get into trouble. But I think the Gemara takes it differently and says, if you don't bother with it, if you give it no sway or don't even think about it, then it's not going to affect you. And that is one opinion. Another one in the same vein says that all dreams have some amount of nonsense in it. Devarim b'telim. So you can't really have a dream and assume that everything in there is a portent of the future or revealing something to you, because dreams, are not never completely accurate. That's that example we get from Yosef. He has this dream that the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bow down to him. And of course, immediately his father's upset and says, this is foolish, because at the time he had this dream, his mother Rachel was no longer alive. And clearly she was meant to be the moon. The brothers were the stars. The father was the sun. The wife was the moon, or vice versa. Maybe she was the one of them, but clearly she was not there. So how could she possibly bow down to Yosef? So the Gemara learns from this that dreams are cloudy and maybe has some truth to it, but a lot of things which aren't true. The Gemara says that a bad dream can be good. For people who might have, God forbid, a bad dream, before you get too worked up about it, the Gemara says for two reasons. A bad dream is actually a good thing, because if something bad was going to happen, it happened in your dream, and it doesn't have to happen in real life. And the second idea the Gemara brings is that if it is something negative, it will hopefully move you to do tshuva. So the Gemara says there that David HaMelech never saw a good dream in his life, that God was always prodding him through these dreams, and it was meant for his own good and growth and development. But of course, when a person has a dream like that, it can be frightening, and we all probably have experienced that, and it's not necessarily pleasant. And therefore, there are a number of things that we can and should do. First of all, we say in the evening Shema, Kriyat Shema Lamita, we say this prayer called Hamapil, and in that we say a bracha to Hashem, who brings sleep. Sleep is something which all human beings have to need to have, and it's a kind of form of suspended animation, or even a kind of semi-comatose state. So we ask Hashem, that we will be able to get up from our sleep, shetashkivenu l'shalom. But we also say, Va'al yevaluni ra'onai v'chalomot ra'im harhurim ra'im. We also say, may ideas, bad dreams, bad notions not plague me or not bother me. So in that prayer, we're already asking Hashem, please, I don't want to have any bad dreams. Now, if you would have a bad dream and it really bothers you, and again, we quoted the opinion that says, don't let it bother you. But if it bothers you, then there are remedies that can be taken. We may be familiar, especially those, come from Chutz La'aretz, where we have this prayer that's recited when the Kohanim would do the blessing, Birkat Kohanim, and while they were singing, so we would say this special Ribono Shel Olam, usually silently, but it says very openly. It says, Ani shalach v'chalomotai shalach. I am yours, God, and my dreams are yours. In other words, implying that the dreams come from you. And it says, I have dreamed a dream. This is not the England's Got Talent of the I Dreamed a Dream, that famous song. Maybe it comes from here. I dreamed a dream, but I don't know what it means. So I'm asking you that all these dreams regarding myself and regarding all of Israel should be good ones. Those I've dreamed about others, and those that others have dreamed about me. Because the Gemara also says that there are three dreams that tend to be fulfilled. One is a morning dream, which we know it can be very vivid. Another is a dream within a dream. And another is a dream that someone has about you, or a dream that's repeated. So when somebody calls them and says, I dreamt this about you, and you're frightened about it, or you dream it a number of times, then another one of these ideas. So the Mapil tries to protect you. And this prayer says, is asking Hashem if they are good dreams, strengthen them, fortify them, and make them like the dreams of who? Of Yosef, his prayer says. And let them be good dreams because he became a ruler of Egypt, etc. But if they need healing and they're not really a good dream, then I'm asking you to transform them into a bracha. Just as you transformed the curse of Bilam into a blessing. So if I dreamt something negative, make it positive, and that allows me to feel better about it. And then you try to time that to the point where the Kohanim come to the end of each of the three-part bracha and amen. So then you answer amen and everybody answers amen, and it's like they are saying amen to your prayer. We don't do that here because we have Birkat Kohanim every day. So we don't say this prayer. It's long, and you may miss that Kohanic chant. But you have another thing you can say here, and that is that when the Kohanim finish their bracha, you can say Adir Bamarom. So that's in the Siddur as well. So the other idea, so those are a couple of things that can help you. You can also have people come and they can spin or turn that dream into something positive. First of all, they can come and they can say, don't worry, nothing bad is going to happen to you. But the Gemara talks about people who are very gifted and able to, whatever you dreamt that you thought was bad, they make it good. And there's many stories told there. And part of it is that words create reality. So when somebody comes and says, no, your dream means X, Y, and Z, and it's going to be, they put a good spin on it. There the Gemara says, Al tehi birkat hedyot kala beinecha. Don't let the blessing of anybody, even if you think they're the simplest person, they don't have to be some great sage, or Hasidic Rabbi. Don't denigrate anybody's attempt to give you a blessing. Shmuel, the great sage, he had a good philosophy, because there are two quotes in the Torah, one saying that dreams are meaningful and one that they're not. If he had a good dream, he would wake up and say, he would quote the verse that says, dreams are accurate. If he had a bad dream, he would quote the verse that says, dreams are shav, they're useless, they don't account for anything. So, and therefore, there's a lot of emphasis there about turning or interpreting a dream. There's a whole story there about a famous interpreter and dreams that Abai and Rava, the two great sages, are usually grouped together. They had some dreams, common dreams between them. And then they came to this interpreter. Abaya paid him a zuz, Rava paid him nothing. And so Abaya got a positive spin and Rava got a negative spin, until Rava finally got the message and decided to pay him. And then he would turn everything. And it's actually very funny. If you look, I won't go through it in the interest of time, but if you look in that section of Brachot, there's about 10 different dreams they have. And this interpreter, he's very skilled. Unfortunately, he meets with a rather ignominious fate, which I won't spoil for you. But if you look up that, again, it's about Daf 55 of Brachot, you'll see it there. And he interpreted one too many dreams negatively. Let's put it that way. The Gemara also says that generally speaking, you dream about things that you've been thinking about, that have played on your mind during the day, and even tell a story that that this King Shapur said, "Can you predict what I'll dream about?" So Shmuel had a long talk with him and told him, I think the day is coming when you're going to be captured by the Romans and they'll do X, Y, and Z and etc. And he was so fearful and thinking about that, sure enough, he had a dream about it. So that's what influences our dreams. And that tells you that, it's based upon our own experiences. And there the Gemara says, no one ever dreamt about an elephant going through the eye of a needle, because you don't think about that. It also says no one dreams about a palm of gold. Now that, however, we're going to Dubai, maybe where the hotels are located on the palm, it could be that that people might think about that. And then the Gemara talks about all the things that might. By the way, it's interesting. The Gemara also says, based upon the story of Yosef, it might take 22 years for your dream to come true, because that's what happened to Yosef. When he dreamt that he was going to be a ruler at the age of 17, it didn't happen until he was 39. So therefore, Gemara says, don't necessarily give up on your dreams. And dreams can really be, as we said before, a motivator. That, as Martin Luther King, I have a dream, that sometimes the dream you have, and you can decide for yourself whether it's heaven sent or otherwise, but it motivates you and it gives you an idea of something that you want to accomplish special in your life. And so the Gemara also has a long discussion about what things you see in a dream are good and what aren't good. But it's interesting that here too, there are a lot of conflicting verses that offer for these things a good or a positive or a negative connotation. And so the Gemara says, be sure if you have one of these dreams that you know the verse that's good. So when you wake up, you can say that, and therefore it will influence it always to be interpreted for good. So even though it says these things are good, it says as a little bit of a qualification that you should attach a verse to it. So some of the things listed, river, bird, and kettle. There was a book written, some of you may know, the river, the bird, and the kettle. But all those seen in a dream are supposed to be positive. If you see a well, if you see grapes, if you see a mountain, if you see a shofar, if you see an ox, wheat, barley, all these are positive. Now, I'm not making this up, but the Gemara says that certain, shall we say, forbidden relationships can also somehow be interpreted for the good. If one has a dream that they had relations with their mother, with their sister, with a married woman, this can also convey something positive, says the Gemara, strangely enough, but not if you thought about it before you went to bed. It adds that condition. If you dream about a goat, an etrog, a hen, even a snake, dreaming about a snake, we're told, interestingly enough, is positive, but you shouldn't kill it in your dream. And then the Gemara there talks about certain people, certain books of the Torah. If you dream about them, it's very positive. And then there are things that if you dream about them, it's negative. And therefore, people might want to somehow get those dreams released from those dreams. They include a monkey, an axe, the color techelet, which is a kind of indigo, and an owl or a bat. I think we can relate to a bat being a bad dream. We've had a bad dream about a bat for the last year. So where exactly these things come from, nobody can say. But this quoted in the Talmud, and apparently, as I say, they took quite an interest in people's dreams, and they didn't dismiss it. And they said, yes, there are ways to relax and kind of calm yourself if you had a dream that you thought is something negative, as we talked about some of the different ways you can do that. But it might also be a way of God reaching out to you, and they allowed for that. Many of the sages of the Gemara are very mystical, and they believe that Hashem has a personal connection to every human being. And sometimes we'll send them a message through a dream. Again, not an easy thing to interpret, but they took it seriously. And when they had a particularly powerful dream, they reacted to it and pretty much went on the opinion that I want to come face to face with this dream and perhaps figure out what it meant, what it means, or what it might mean for me ultimately. Let me close with, because it's Hanukkah, I want to introduce Hanukkah into this shir. And if you know anything about Hasidism, Hasidim always tell stories about dreams of the great Hasidic leaders. I want to tell you one of my favorite stories, and it's well known. It's a story told about the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of Hasidism. And there are many stories, dream sequences about the Baal Shem Tov. So in this story, the Baal Shem Tov has a dream. And in his dream, he is in Olam Haba, he's in heaven, and he's sitting in the first row in the prime seat in Olam Haba. And as he looks to the side, he sees someone sitting in the same row as him, someone that he recognizes from his town. And the Baal Shem Tov wakes up and he thinks to himself, wow, I have to meet this person. I don't really have any connection to him, but I know he lives in my town. I'm going to meet him to see, he must be, without sounding conceited, he must be someone quite remarkable to have been given that same seat right in the front at Olam Haba. So he asks about the man, and when he asks people about him, no one has a very positive thing to say. But he decides, I'm going to go to his house and I'm going to watch and see if I can see anything special about him. So he goes there and he kind of secretly looks through the window and he sees this man. He's very, very fat. He's huge. He's obese. And as the Baal Shem Tov watches, all he really sees him doing is eating. When he finishes eating, he's eaten so much he has to rest. He gets up again and he goes for another meal. And the Baal Shem Tov thinks, I don't understand this. Was my dream just ridiculous? He finally decides, I have to know. He knocks at the door and he asks the man to let him in. And he says, we don't know each other, but I need to ask you, is there something special about you? What is it special about you? And the man says, there's really nothing special about me. I really don't even work. And, I live a very simple life. The Baal Shem Tov says, there must be something you did in your life. And he says, well, there's only one thing that I guess stands out, an incident in my life. He said, I was walking with a friend of mine once, and we were walking through the forest, and there came upon us a group of hooligans, and they took out their cross, and they said to my friend, we want you to kiss the cross. And my friend said, no. And they said, if you don't, you're going to be sorry. And he said, well, I won't. And they took out a bottle of kerosene and they poured it over him. And they said, if you don't do what we tell you to do, then we're going to set you on fire. And he said, well, I won't go against my God. So you'll have to do what you do. And they set him on fire. And said this man, I watched my friend. He was very skinny. and the fire from his body burned very shortly. It hardly made any fire at all. He said, and I swore to myself that I would become so big and so huge that if I ever had to give up my life for my God, the fire from my body would burn forever and light up the universe. And that's why I eat. And the Baal Shem Tov was just completely mortified by all this. And he gave the man a blessing. He walked out of the house and he said, now I understand why he was seated in the first row. But what I don't understand is, why did I deserve a place as close to the Almighty as him? That is not the most upbeat, but that's one of the most famous stories about the Baal Shem Tov and his dream, and about the fire of dedication to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I thank all of you for tuning in. Next week, we will be back, God willing, with a more Parsha-centered shiur. I hope you'll enjoy this last night and day of Hanukkah. And I appreciate you giving up some of that by joining together and studying. And it should be a fire and a light that goes out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to recognize that we're also devoted, and we're asking him to give us each a certain light, which is what Hanukkah represents. That each of us is a light that shines into the universe. So I wish you a Hanukkah Sameach and a Shabbat Shalom.
Hanukkah Sameach.
Hanukkah Shalom.
And let me know if you have any dreams about this year when I see you next week. And we can
Rabbi,
try
I have
to,
a quick question.
and we'll certainly interpret